Okay, we can use clips or pins for this next part, totally up to you. What we are going to do is attach, this is for letters that only have an outer edge, don't have any insides, these are outside letters only. We are going to attach the outer loop that we've created to one of the front or back, one of the pieces. So you want to put the right sides together. And I think on this E, it's easiest to have the seam not be on a corner. So I'm gonna just put it in the middle here. And the trickiest part about these pieces with corners is that you're going to have to clip into the seam allowance to get the corner nice. So we're gonna use a lot of clips. We're gonna use a lot. So when you get to the first corner, so I'm at the top of the E here, I'm gonna just hold this with my fingers and then gonna rotate around the curve a little bit here. And then I'm gonna put a pin or a clip in. And then I'm gonna keep going. We might have to take this off and adjust. So just don't be discouraged if you have to take your clips off and your pins off a million times as you get the placement of these curves right. So the other thing we can do is we can clip, just take a tiny pair of scissors and just clip a tiny bit into the curve. See how that like kind of makes it nice and flat? I'm gonna zoom in here for you. So see, I just clipped it ever so slightly and that made things a little bit easier for the curve to get it flatter. The E has a lot of curves, as you know. I'm not gonna clip into them into all of the corners right now because I just want to see how much fabric I have to work with. And remember too that the seam allowance for this thing is 1/2 inch. So you might not need to get it perfectly lined up on the raw edges and it will still work. Just kind of looks like a lump right now. So I have one more little corner area. Yeah, so if you're tracking with what I'm doing, I have this whole edge that's like not fitting. So I am gonna have to unclip, see how to make a little extra slack there. So, I mean, first things first, I can clip some of my corners. Clip into them a little bit. And that definitely creates the slack we need to get around. Or at least it helps to create that slack. So when you've got a lot of corners, go ahead and clip them. Clip into your fabric a little bit. Okay, this is working so much better with all of the clips. Snips, I should say. So we're not confused between the clips and the snips. But the little snips into the seam allowances, that definitely helps things. Okay, so I'm still coming up a little bit short on outer edge fabric here. So I probably need to go in and just readjust. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. With all the clips, actually, I'm very, very close. I'm much, much, much closer than I was the first time with the clips. So that's awesome. So the snipping into the seam allowance really, really helped to get it in. I just need to fix this little gap I have, this little opening. Try to adjust without taking everything off. Might need to clip a couple more times in here to get this to work. All right, so I've got my entire E clipped up and snipped, clipped and snipped, and ready for sewing. It doesn't look like much, but we are going to sew this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and we're gonna go extra slow, extra slow. That's the only way to do this. Slow and steady wins the race here. All right, we're stitching the first outer edge of our E, and we need to just do this extremely slow. So I think the easiest way to sew the pillow is with the actual front, the letter shape on top, so you can see all the curves and things that you need to hit and the pivots and everything. Otherwise, you're gonna have a really hard time knowing on these small pillows especially what part of the letter you're sewing. and it's just gonna be extra tricky. So we're sewing with the E part up. And the other thing we wanna make sure of is that we're sewing just the two pieces together. We're not, you know, pulling in other parts of the letter as we go. So this is done at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and you want to back stitch on either side as you go. And I'm gonna, if you have a speed control on your machine, crank that baby really low. You don't want to be tempted to go fast here. So I've just turned my speed setting down. Okay, and I know I'm on the straight side of the E right now. And that's why sewing with the letter part up is really helpful. The other thing you want to be watching out for is just feeling with your fingers. Make sure nothing's jumbling or getting buckled underneath as you're sewing. Because if it gets buckled or pleated in a way that's not intended, then you will have to rip that out and fix it to have a nice crisp pillow at the end. Okay, so actually, I never snipped into this first corner. So that is gonna give me a little extra slack. Okay, it's okay. So I'm gonna continue on, 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then when we get to the corner, we're gonna pivot, but we're also gonna tuck the fabric kind of underneath. So the needle is still inserted, as you can see, but we wanna tuck the outer edge fabric underneath so it's not jumbled before we put the presser foot back down. So I'm just kind of smoothing everything out. Smoothing is the key. Then you're gonna rotate, after everything's smoother, you are going to rotate your fabric. Needle is still inserted here, by the way, guys. Keep it inserted. Once everything is smoothed out, you can kind of feel that it's in a smoother place where you're just sewing the two pieces of fabric here. Put your presser foot back down, continue on in your 1/2 inch seam allowance till you get to the next corner. And just keep being mindful of the fabric as it's bunching underneath the presser foot because of those little unintentional pleats I was talking about. You don't want to have as much as you possibly can control. Okay, and we're coming up to another corner at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna pivot my needle. I'm gonna smooth everything out. Smooth everything out again. We don't want too much fabric jumbled underneath everything. On these corner pieces, these corner letters, you just really want to go slow, and that's why I said, you know, having your speed and everything just set to really, really low. Just slow and steady totally wins the race when it comes to these corners, these little fiddly bits. Okay. Just do your best to go slow and smooth things out. Okay, so I am coming now into one of the inside corners of the letter E, so just need to be mindful of when to pivot my needle. And this might end up being a bit fiddly. You might get some pleats you don't like, no matter how hard you try to not have them. You might just have to fix them at the end. Okay, so I need to go straight here, just smoothing everything out while my needle is still inserted, while my presser foot is still raised. Okay, and I'm coming to another corner bit. Definitely picked the hardest letter to demonstrate to you guys. Oh, this is such an easy pattern. No. That might not be what you're thinking if you're sewing a letter E. Just putting that out there. Okay. It's okay. We got this. Just keep smoothing the parts out as best as we can. And pivoting when we're able. Okay, so we've done 2 of the corners of the E. Coming up on a 3rd here. Just to set your own expectations, you should just prepare yourself that you are going to have to correct some bunching and stuff that may have happened. So just prepare yourself. It's not done. Okay, and then this is the 3rd and final little doodad corner. Well, I shouldn't say that because there's more corners coming, but the little like final jut out, I should say, of the letter E. Okay, so we were going that way. We're now going this way around the corner. And we've hit the end, backstitch. All right, from here we're going to see how badly we did or what all we need to change. Okay, we've just stitched the first outer edge of the E pillow. What we need to do is now turn it right side out and see how crisp we got things and what we need to do better, take out, fix, do differently. Troubleshooting a little bit here. Okay, so overall, it's really not too bad. As I was sewing, it felt horrible. Not gonna lie. Felt like I was doing horribly, but it actually does resemble a letter E. So if what you've done resembles the letter that you're trying to do, good job. If it doesn't, don't be discouraged. That's why seam rippers were invented. And that's why we're going to fix some things. So this area here, I know you can't really see it because of my fabric. It's kind of chunky. I don't love it. I'm gonna try to smooth that out, I think. But first, I need to fix this area because things got really weird here for me. So fixing areas sometimes just looks like pulling a couple stitches out with your seam ripper and just smoothing it out as best as you can and going back over it. And when you do that, when you go back over stuff, you just want to make sure that you back stitch on either side, just to reinforce that stitching area so that you don't lose your stitches or anything when you do get it fixed. But really, it just looks like pulling out a couple of the stitches and then trying again. Everybody is going probably to have to do this. So don't be discouraged if this is you right now. And then you want to check for other areas that are like you've definitely pulled too much fabric in and you shouldn't have, or there's some really weird pleating happening or bunching happening. That's actually not horrible. Like a couple of pleats are pretty normal. But yeah, so I think all in all, you want it to be relatively crisp. Just get things fixed. Okay, so I just really have one spot that I'm really unhappy with that I want to fix before we move on. So fix whatever spots you need to, and we'll come back and we'll continue. Okay, if you needed to fix some things, that's fine. If you've fixed them adequately and you're happy with them, then just flip everything back to the wrong side for a second, and we're gonna clip into the corners and press our letter. Clipping the corners will help make everything more crisp. So just gonna clip the corners off, clip around the corners to reduce seam bulk, and just make sure you don't clip into the actual stitching. You can also snip a little further in if you need to. Whatever it takes to get things crisp when you turn it. Okay, once you feel like you've adequately clipped the corners, turn everything right side out and press so that you can get it nice and crisp before we move on to the next part. Okay, it's starting to look like an E. Yay. So what we need to do is we're going to start by attaching the other E part here to the outer edge. So there are a couple of different things you can do if you want to help yourself and you've got a lot of corners like I do on this E pillow. You can draw a line, or you can just simply kind of fold. See where you've snipped in the past, or where you've done a letter in the past, or a corner, sorry, in the past. You can kind of make that a fold and snip it in preparation for what's to come. The other side. You could also mark it with chalk. All of these things will just kind of help you get lined up for the other part, for the second half of the E, or the second half of the letter that you're going to be doing. Anything to kind of help you with the corners, because you don't have to completely reinvent the wheel like we did the first time where we had to line everything up. We've already done the hard part in a sense by lining this stuff up. So, go ahead and take advantage of that by snipping into the corners prematurely. Okay, once you've made snips or, whatever you're doing, we're going to continue with what we did before. We're going to get the E lined up. This time we have a bit of a template that we're working with here. Starting on a corner, is not a bad thing. Definitely will help you get lined up. And remember, you have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so you don't have to clip all the way to the raw edges if you don't want to. Hopefully the pinning is going smoother the second time around. Should be a little easier in theory. Okay, once you have everything pinned, just take a peek at it. Make sure you've pinned all the parts that should be together. Okay, and then in the case of this E, I want, before I'm stitching, I want to leave a gap, an opening, about 2 to 3 inches for stuffing. So that could either be on the longest, straightest side or the top even. You know, whatever you think. I think I'm gonna try for the top. So I'm gonna stick pins in so that I differentiate this a little bit for myself here. Kind of remind myself to leave a gap for turning. Okay, so this pinned area is where we're gonna not stitch anything at all so that we can fill and turn our pillow. Okay, so let's go over to the machine. We're gonna stitch again, 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around, and then we're almost done. Okay, so here we are again. We're gonna be stitching some more, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna recommend the same thing, that you stitch with the E that we're attaching, or the letter that we're attaching up, and 1/2 inch seam allowance. Just go slow and steady. I'm starting with the straightest edge I have first here. And then I'm going to be moving into my fun corners. And just remember to check for jumbling underneath. And going into this first sharp corner, I'm gonna get another little snip going. Okay. Okay, and we're coming around our last corner, and we're coming to the place with the opening. So we just want to back stitch, pin, and then we need to finish the other opening as well. And that's going into a corner, so we just, okay. Good job. Hopefully that went a little bit better this time than it did the last time. And you didn't have to do any fixing or anything. Mine's looking pretty good. I think the only thing I'm gonna do is just do some more snips into the seam allowances for movement purposes when we flip it. And we can clip the corners off to reduce seam bulk here. Once you've done that, we can turn everything out through the hole we've left. Find the hole, and let's turn right side out. And it should look like the letter that you're making. The limp version of your letter, at least. Poke the corners out with your fingers. Okay. And the next thing that we're gonna do is stuff it.